Hi everyone, today we're going to take a closer look at this Asus building block. Not one set, but two sets. Now I've not done this, but I pieced up this together. And this two set in fact is given to me by Asus Singapore. And how does this look like? It looks like this. I'll go through with you in depth of how I built these pieces together. I'm only kidding. Alright, the main attraction in fact is this new liquid AIO coming from Asus known as the ROG Ryujin 360 ARGB. I will show you what's inside the box itself and go through with you the accessories and to show you the ARGB effects of this liquid AIO and the main attraction, which is the LCD panel. Now besides this, I will be showing you the performance of how this performs on an Intel platform. With this said, I'd like to thank Asus Singapore to have loaned this set for me to share with you guys. Let's begin. Before doing the unboxing itself, something to take note: if you decided to purchase this unit, please handle with care because the box itself, right, as you can see, it doesn't fix. So when you are handling this box itself, right, make sure you support the back and to lift it up and to carry it. If not, right, if you are just holding the sides itself, see, it just drop off. So something to take note. Now when you unbox this box itself, right, you'll be ushered with a greeting card, the welcome to Republic Gamers of Gamers. Then in this box itself, right, you will be having 3 fans, which is this. So we have 3 fans, and it does have the accessory package, which I'm going to go through with you later. The instruction manual. It shows you all the mounting points and such, and a sticker, and of course the main unit. The radiator itself, and the block. In the accessory package itself, these are all the components whereby each individual are packed nicely in Ziploc bags. Starting from the lower left, this is meant for your AMD platform and it supports AM5 and AM4. And this bracket, you're supposed to remove the original brackets from the motherboard and to replace with this in order for you to fit the AIO block. Over at this section here, these are for the Intel, which provides the backplate. Be it generation 9 all the way to 13, you'll be using this backplate. And of course, 4 standoffs, whereby you place this underneath, or should I say below the motherboard, going through the holes itself, right? And these are the standoffs, which I will explain in detail later. Now, given 2 sets of thumb screws, and what are they for? Now, each set has a different styling. As you can see over here, one is with a line or groove, one without. Now, take note, for the one that with groove, right, this is meant for all AMD platform, and for the Intel, right, it's actually for Gen 9 all the way to Gen 11. As for this without the groove, this is only meant for the 1700 bracket, which is meant for your generation 12 and 13 processor. You'll be provided with a bag of radiator screws, whereby you mount the radiator to your case, which you can see. I'm not too sure you can see. There are some short screws. See this short screws over here? This is meant for you to mount your radiator to the case. And as for the long screws itself, right, this long screws over here, this is whereby you mount your fan to the radiator. Now you'll be given 2 sets of cables, whereby it has one side to be connected to your fan and the other side, which is a standard ARGB connector and a 4-pin PWM fan. Now take note that these 2 sets, right, they are different. As you can see, one end here, this is the male connector, and this is the female connector. I'll explain to you later on how this connector works. The main unit itself, of course, it contains a 360 radiator with the AIO block. Now, starting off with the radiator itself, at the side, the thickness of this is at 28mm, which is a standard 360 AIO, or should I say radiator. And as you can see here, right, the holes are nicely braided all the way from the radiator to the block. Having to say this, right, at each side of the radiator you have this ROG embedded wording, see, and over at the other side. Now, when you are using this radiator itself, right, make sure you remove off this protective cap, which is on both sides. You have to remove this, and at the back to remove this. A nice touch, because this is very heavy, so when you handle with it, right, if you are not filling up the fans itself or mount on your case itself, at all times leave this protection on, because as mentioned, this is quite heavy, so when you knock against, right, it will not dent the pin stack. Now, besides this, right, the hose have this Velcro stripe to keep the hose intact. It's adjustable. Now, coming to the block itself, as you can see, this is a very big, okay, let me just turn this. As you can see, this is a very big block, whereby this is the LCD panel, which is 3.5 inch. Now, looking at the side, right, you have this ventilated hose with the ROG strict logo. This is ROG. See? Now, this thing is detachable. See, it's magnetic. So this whole LCD here, right, the 3.5 inch LCD, right, is detachable, whereby you have a cable to plug this to your USB header on your motherboard itself. This is to control the LCD itself. And on the block, now there is this fan over here. What is this for? This is meant for it to draw cool air and to dissipate through here and through the side. See all this ventilator hose? This is to cool your motherboard VRMs, your RAMs, and your M.2. And when you're mounting this block here, right, it's only one direction, whereby the hose, I'll show you later, the hose will be facing this way and the RAMs will be down here, because go according to the words. Now, besides this, right, this, as mentioned, this is detachable, so you have the cable, the USB cable 2.0 for your LCD, and of course a 4-pin PWM connector to control the pump and the fan. Besides this, the hose over on the block itself, right, this you're able to swivel, so you can just move accordingly. Now, at the cold plate itself, this is a whole copper. Oh, by the way, the fin stack on the radiator is aluminium, but the cold plate is copper. It has a very big surface area with pre-applied thermal paste. And at all times, if you are not placing this to the processor, right, have this protective cap on so that you don't accidentally touch the pre-applied paste. But most of us, what we will do is to clean this off and to apply our own paste for better thermal performance. Now, as you can see, right, this block here is pretty chunky, inclusive of the LCD itself. And the measurements, right, from here to here is 89mm in width, and from here to here is 91mm in width. And the overall height from the cold plate all the way to the top of the LCD itself is 101mm thickness. These are all ARGB fans that is running on 12V DC. The model of these fans are ROG MF12S ARGB, and each fan is drawing a current of 0.35 ampere. For the RPM itself, for max is 2200 RPM. For the measurements of the fan itself, from here to here and from the top to the bottom is 120 millimeter, and the thickness of this fan is at 25 millimeter. The structure of the fan itself is okay. It does flex a bit, but I'm not so worried. Reason being, right, it's squarish, so when you daisy chain them together, right, you will form the sturdy structure, as in like no wobbling and such. Speaking of which, we hit the front or the back itself, you have 4 anti-vibration grommets. See? Now this is a 7-blader, and it does have a cone shape surrounding the blade, and this will draw lots of air, as in like pulling more air that goes through your radiator itself. And for the design of the fan itself, as you can see at the back, you have this very nice ROG logo. Then on the rubber grommets, right, there are some detailing, which is a nice touch. Then at all the sides, as you can see over here, right, there are some detailing, the ROG logo. This is just a slot. Again, the ROG logo and the slot. Now, one thing good about this fan itself, right, it has a very simple daisy chain mechanism. As you can see here, right, one end over here, this is male connector, and at the other end, this is a female connector. So you can daisy chain them, and it's magnetic. This will allow you to daisy chain them without having any cables. It's wireless, so you don't have to fiddle with the cable management. A well thought design by ASUS. Now, another thing is that when you mount this on the radiator itself, right, I would to advise you, once you have attached all together, place it on the radiator, screw one end first, okay, have it fixed, then use the other finger, right, once it's screwed on, use the other finger, just tuck it in, then you continue to screw with the rest. Reason being, right, there are times whereby, okay, these are magnetic, true enough, they go through, but sometimes if you don't tuck in, right, with the other end of the fingers itself, right, while you're screwing in, if you just leave it this way, then you screw in all the radiator screws on the fans itself, right, you might accidentally leave a gap, so that will prevent good connection point. So I would advise, as mentioned, screw one fan on the radiator itself. Once it's done, right, then use the other hand just to tuck it in to fit all the fans together, then you screw the rest. This will ensure proper connection itself. Now, speaking about the daisy chain itself, right, you can't daisy chain at a different direction, meaning you say if you want it different, right, you can't. See, you will not daisy chain at all, though it's magnetic, because the contact point, right, doesn't touch each other. So you will need to face them at the same direction. With this indicator on the fan frame itself, right, the logo, make sure they are facing correctly, then you do the daisy chain. And earlier on, when I show you the accessories whereby you give you 2 sets of cable, where one end is meant to connect to your fans to complete the daisy chain, and the other end, this is for your motherboard fan header, which control the RPM, and this is the standard 5V 3-pin ARGB connector. Now, why do they give you 2 sets? Because if you to take note at both ends over here, this is a male connector, this is a female connector. Now, assuming you have placed this in the radiator itself, okay, and let's say your case, the case motherboard is over here, and you wouldn't want to place it down here because this is facing the front, so you want to face at the back, which is here. So this end over here, right, it's a female connector. You will need a male connector, which is this, see, to plug it in. Now, to plug it in, right, take a look at this hole over here. Just make sure that it matches the hole over here, then keep it in, make sure it flush. Okay, if not, right, if you do it incorrectly, right, this is what's going to happen. You're going to leave a gap which you have no contact to the pins of the fan itself. So make sure you have it flush. Okay, as mentioned, there is this hole over here, I mean the stud over here sticking out, matches the hole on the frame. Alright, then let's say if you want to plug at the front instead of the back, make use of the other one, which this is the female and this is the male. Again, there's a grooving over here, align to the hole over here. Just make sure that it's flush. If it's not flush, right, as mentioned, see, you're leaving a gap which there are no contact point. And please be very alert when you're connecting this itself, because some of you might just be absent-minded. Okay, I'm not saying everyone. You can connect on both ends with these cables here. So if you are to connect both ends to your motherboard itself and supplying power at both ends, right, you might damage the fans itself. So at all times, make sure when you daisy chain, right, only have one connection point and not two. Okay, don't feed current from both ends. You definitely damage the fans itself. To mount your AIO, I mean the block itself, to the IHS, you will need to prepare some brackets. Now this is based on the AM4 and AM5 platform. First thing you need to do is to remove off the original brackets from the motherboard and retain these screws over here. Next, as mentioned, you will need this. This is meant for the AMD platform, and if you look closely, right, there's this CPU with the arrow pointing inwards. So you have to mount your bracket this way with the arrow pointing towards the CPU. So once you have placed this in place, where I told you to retain the screws from the original mounting, then you screw it in. You don't have to be too tight. In fact, just nice when it reaches a certain tension. So make sure it's secured. Done. And when you're placing the block itself, right, okay, let me just zoom in. Now when you're placing the block itself, right, make sure you detach the LCD first. Then you can remove this. As mentioned, you can apply your own paste or to use the pre-paste. Then from there, right, 4 points over here, 1 2 3 4, flushes with the 4 point over here, 1 2 3 4. So when you place it down, right, okay, I'm not going to leave it down. So once you align it and place it according to the 4 screw points over here, make use of the thumb screws. Take note, this is the thumb screws that have grooving. So assuming that the block is in, so what you need to do is diagonally tighten it at both ends until the block is pressured to the IHS, and firmly secure it. So it should be this way. So once that's done, right, I'm not going to do it over here because I'm going to do it on the actual Intel platform. Now once this is done, right, assuming that it's down, make sure the hose is facing towards the M.2 slot, okay, and not at the side. Reason being, right, when you place this LCD back, okay, the wording over here, right, should be aligned with your M.2. If you're gonna do it, like for example this way, it's gonna be wrong because your LCD display, right, when you place this, I mean when you place the motherboard in the case itself, right, your wording will be like this, which is wrong. So you will need to place it this way. Okay, with the wording over here, align to the M.2 and the hose facing downwards, so that when you display, right, it will display correctly. For Intel platform itself, what is needed is the back plate, 4 standoff screws, 4 thumb screws. Now for the thumb screws, right, I will talk about it later because there are 2 kinds, which is one I've mentioned with the grooving, this is without. Starting off with preparing the back plate. Now if you take a look at the back plate itself, right, you can push this in or to push this out. Now if you are using generation 9 to 11, right, make sure you push this in. Okay, so that this is meant for generation 9 to 11 Intel processor. For now, I'm going to illustrate on the Gen 12 or 13, which I'm going to use a 13700K. So what you need to do to fit the 1700 bracket, you will need to push this out. Once you have done this, turn over your motherboard. Let me just zoom this in. Now at the back of your motherboard, there are 4 holes over here. So you align it with your back plate screw threads. No force are needed. Gently just glide down the hose. Once it's in place, right, flip it over. Make sure that you see the screw thread is protruding out at the 4 corners. Next we'll be applying the standoffs. You can do it hand tight. Now this is done. Next thing you need to do, either you apply thermal paste, okay, assuming there's a processor here, either you apply the thermal paste or to make use of the pre-applied paste. So what you need to do is just unwrap this, then again, same as the AMD method, align the 4 section over here, 1, 2, 3, 4 against the screws over here, I mean the standoffs, and make sure that the hose is facing towards the M.2, and once it's placed in right according to these 4 points over here, make use of the thumb screws. Just a gentle reminder, when you place the AIO block to the IHS according to the 4 slots over here, right, you need to use the thumb screws to tighten it, as in like tighten the block to give enough pressure to the IHS and to hold in place. Okay, this is what it meant for. Now, as mentioned to you, there are 2 sets of thumb screws. One is with the grooving, which as you can see here. The other one is without. If you are to have a Intel processor of generation 9 to 11, make sure you make use of this thumb screw which are with grooving. If you are doing it on a 12 gen or 13 gen, please make use of this, which is without the grooving. And assuming you have placed the AIO on the IHS, make sure your host again facing the M.2 and not over here. Again, the reason for it is your LCD. So if it happens that you mount your LCD, right, you will be at the correct orientation because of the wording. Make sure this wording, right, is flushes the M.2. So it goes like this. Okay, let me just zoom out. So that when you display, right, you're displaying the correct wording that's across this way, and not mounting it as in like having the AIO mounted this way. It will be incorrect. This is how it looks like when I mount the liquid AIO on my test bench. Now, starting off with the fans itself, there are two cables you need to take note, whereby you need to connect the fan PWM to the CPU fan header 1, and the ARGB connector connect to the 3-pin 5V ARGB header on the motherboard itself. And as for the AIO block, right, there are two parts. As you can see here, this is the LCD itself is showing. Now, speaking about the LCD, right, just a reminder, the wording over here, right, make sure it flushes the M.2 so that it gives you a correct direction when you display all the displays and such. So make sure you do this. If you to mount your AIO the other way around, which is like this, right, see, it's going to be wrong. So make sure at all times, right, the wording is facing on the M.2 and the host is facing the M.2. Now back to the connection. There are two more connections you need to connect, whereby this LCD itself, right, have a USB connector. Plug it to your motherboard USB 2.0 header, and of course the fan and the pump itself, right, plug the 4-pin PWM fan connector to the pump area. This is the interface of the Armoury Crate from Asus. First thing you need to do, right, in order for you to control the LCD panel, you will need to download the application. So go to settings. Once you've done this, right, click on update center. Now you need to update and install this application called Ryujin 3. Now just to show you, as you can see on the display itself, I am going to select the Orosing, whereby this is to control the ARGB on your fans and the RAMs. So let me just toggle it. This, see, this is for your fans. And if you want to toggle the LCD itself, right, you need to go to device, then click on Ryujin 3, and it will bring you to this interface. As you can see on the LCD panel, right, it's showing this. So you can add on different slides. Let's say you want to add on this slides over here, and you apply. Okay, let me just do this. Maybe back to this. If you click on apply, right, every 5 seconds it will changes the display. So as you witness the LCD on my right, see, it's changing. And of course, you can set to wallpaper if you want to. Select the wallpaper that you wanted. Okay, let's say I'm going to delete all this. Now, for example, let's say you want to set wallpaper. You can just add the wallpaper. It's stationary, so you don't have to, you know, have it run. So if I were to apply, right, take a look, it's going to change accordingly to the wallpaper. See? So that happens in every 5 seconds. You can set it longer and such. Now this is only on the slider itself. There's one more interesting thing, whereby if you want to do just to look at the time, you can just click on time and to apply. And the format itself, right, as you can see on the display, right, this is 12 hours. If you want to set 24 hours, just click here and to apply. Now these are some of the basic functions. If you want to monitor temperature, you can click this and to click on hardware monitor, and this is where it monitors the temperature of the CPU, or you can declare whatever you wish to see. For example, you want to look at the motherboard temperature. When you apply on it, right, it will show you the motherboard temperature. I'll just set this back to CPU. Besides this, right, there is a theme. If you don't like this theme, you can just switch Cyberpunk and to apply. See? Now earlier on I mentioned that this block, right, should be orientated in one direction. I didn't realize that you can set this orientation as portrait. So it doesn't matter which host you are facing, as in like the radiator host on the pump block, whether is it aligned to the M.2 or aligned to the RAMs itself, right, you can switch the orientation. See? Take a look at the screen right now. So these are some of the features that you can play with. I'm going to conduct a noise test right now. As you can see, the microphone is away from the radiator fans for 1 feet. So this is how it sounds like when it's at idle. And this is at load. And this is at idle. And this is at load again. Now to test on the thermal results on this AIO with the processor, these are the components that I'll be using. The 13th gen Intel Core i7 13700K with a ASUS ROG Strix B760F gaming Wi-Fi motherboard, and the RAMs are the 32GB kit coming from Team Group. Now what's important in fact is the configuration. Let me just take you to the advanced mode. What I've done, right, at AI Twinkle, I've set the XMP profile so that my RAMs run at 6000 megahertz with this timing over here. Now I will be limiting the power drawn, which I will set this max on a i7 13700K at a wattage pool of 253, be it the long duration or the short duration. Besides this, I've limited down the BRM to offset, so as and when the processor needs to run at 5GB and above, right, it will pull the wattage, or should I say the current, from the PSU to the motherboard accordingly to what is needed. So it will not always run at 253 watt, probably it will be lower. Besides this, I've set under the fan profile itself, right, for Q fan configuration. Now this is my CPU fan, where I set it to, okay, probably I will set to, okay, I just leave it at PWM and set it at full. And for the pump itself, I'll leave it as full. Something which I noticed is that the specs of the fans, now the fan is rated as 2200 RPM, but this is running at 2042 RPM max. I believe there are some restriction between the fan itself when it's mounted on the radiator. That's why it doesn't go 2200 RPM. So doesn't matter, this is still okay. Now I'm going to boot to Windows and to show you what are the benchmark that I'll be using and to how do I conduct the test itself. System is up and running and it's in Windows. I make use of this application called Cinebench R23, whereby I will run 3 times 10 minutes benchmark. The first 2 times 10 minutes I will not be recording it. It's just to let this AIO settle down on a new system so that it will cure between the cold plate of the block to the IHS and to settle down all the fans that is mounted on the radiator itself. Once that's done, right, I'll let it rest for 5 minutes at idle, as you can see the graph over here. So this is the CPU temperature at idle. Once that's done, right, I will then conduct the third 10 minutes where I will do the recording. And with this graph over here, right, you will witness that it will go up when it's load. I mean at 100% full load. Now, over on my right over here, these are all the stats where I pull from Hardware Info 64 with the OSD, where you can see the CPU temperature, the motherboard temperature, the VRM temperature, the DDR5, which are the RAMs. There are 2 sticks, and the M.2. And as and when, take a look at the core usage when I run the benchmark. This will be at 100. Now, for the power drawn itself, right, this will not be maxed out at 253. Even though I've limited the power to 253 max. Reason being, right, I've done the offset as I've shown you. This will, the processor will pull whatever voltage it needed to pump at 5 GHz. So take note of this. Now, as for the fan itself, right, this is the AIO pump that's ramping up at full speed. And for the CPU fan, it's ramping up all the way full speed consistently. Now, you might be thinking that the fan's rated as 2200 RPM. How come it's 2000 over here? Well, as mentioned, since fans are mounted on the radiator itself, right, there are some restriction. So I believe that's the reason why it's running at 2000 RPM. So with this said, right, I'm going to conduct the warm-up first and to do the recording. Let's begin. The first 10 minutes have done, and I've let it idle for 5 minutes. Right now, I'm going to conduct the final 10 minutes and to explain to you the results. Let's begin. Results are out. What can I say? Look at the CPU temperature. It's hovering around 69 to 70 degrees Celsius. And do note that my room temperature right now is ranging from 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, based on the fact that right now it's actually raining. So when I conduct this test, right, when I look at the CPU, I was like stunned. Okay, 69 to 70. Reason being, right, it's drawing at 192 watt to sustain at this frequency, which is 5.287 megahertz, and at 100 load, right, it can sustain with all this temperature over here. And as mentioned, I've limited the power. It draws this much in order to have this clock frequency. And look at the rest of the temperature over here. None of this have exceed 50 degrees Celsius. Impressive. Hope you guys have enjoyed what I've shared with you, and I am impressed with this liquid AIO. In fact, it does perform. Based on the fact that I've mounted this on the open bench test, and the room temperature, because it's raining, it's around 28 degrees Celsius to 29 degrees Celsius, and it's hovering around 69 to 70 degrees Celsius. That is able to sustain at a 5.287 gigahertz clock speed on the processor itself, and its drawing power is 192 watt. So far, this is the most impressive temperature that I've witnessed. Now, even though it is normal temperature here in Singapore, which is around 30 to 31 degrees Celsius room temperature, I believe that this liquid AIO temperature, right, will not go beyond 74 degrees Celsius. And if I were to place this inside a case, right, it should be hovering around 74 to 75 degrees Celsius, depending on the case airflow. And another thing that works, right, in fact, is this fan over here, which I'm actually impressed of. This fan is not for show. In fact, it does bring in cool air and to dissipate the cool air from the side, which goes through the ventilator hose over here. That's why you witness that the VRM temperature, the RAM temperature, and the M.2 temperature is not more than 47 degrees Celsius. In fact, it doesn't touch 47 at all. It's around 44 to 46 degrees Celsius, which is good. Another thing I like to talk about are in fact the fans itself. as rated each fan, the max RPM is 2200, but it turned out that when I place this on the radiator itself, right, all of this fans is running at a max of 2000 RPM. I was skeptic about the fan when it goes 2000. Will it be able to cool down the system itself? It did. In fact, it does well cooling the radiator itself, even though it's running at 2000 RPM. I believe it's the design of the blades and the ring that I mentioned. It draws lots of air, and it's kind of like different. You know, the whole ring, right, is not a whole full ring. It's in fact with some curvature. So I believe that helps to draw more air to your radiator, to cool the radiator itself. Now, another thing about this fans itself, right, are super quiet. When I ramp up at 2000 RPM, right, you have witness that was just a 1 feet away. So imagine that you place this in your case and you're 1 meter away, where your case is actually enclosed. I would say that I can't hear the fans at all. And also another thing is that the daisy chain style, the mechanism of this fans itself, right, are well executed, because you don't have to fiddle with messy cables and to do cable management, because it just magnetizes to each other, and you're provided with this set of cables whereby you can choose either end, whether this end or this end. So if I were to choose this end, right, I will just clip. See, just make sure that this is flush. At any point of time, right, if you want to remove, right, well, since this is actually attached to the motherboard itself, right, you can just take this out and to take out the radiator. And of course, if you don't want to choose this side, you can choose this side. See, it would just clip into place. Just make sure that it only use one cable and do not plug two. Alright, if you are going to plug two, right, the input here, you might damage the fans itself, or even short circuit the motherboard. So never do two side. It's only one side, or should I say one daisy chain, one cable. That's it. Now, speaking about the cabling itself, right, this whole ecosystem here, right, is only having 4 connectors, or should I say 4 connecting points. 2 to the AIO, 2 to the fans. Now, as the fans mentioned, one is for the 4-pin PWM fan connector to your motherboard, and this is the standard ARGB 5V 3-pin connector to your motherboard. And as for the AIO itself, right, to control the LCD, you only need to plug the USB 2.0 connector to your motherboard. And for the pump itself, right, it makes use of this 4-pin PWM connector, whereby the pump you can control within the UEFI or the Armoury Crate utility. But I would advise to run the pump at max 100%. If not, you can lower down to 80%, but not lower than that. Reason being, right, you want to have, you know, consistent regulation of the liquid within the pump to your radiator, so that you will dissipate all the warm water out through the pump and to back to the radiator. So it's like, you know, having a faster cycle. Now, the only thing that I do not like about this so-called unique fans over here, they are good in a way that is actually on the radiator, but you can't buy this separately. So having to say this, right, you have one suite of very nice fans over here, but for the rest of your case fan, right, you will need to purchase other model kinds of fans, which I find that not really that good. I hope that ASUS can think of a way whereby you can sell this individually. In fact, these are very good fans because of the mechanism itself. So imagine that you are able to purchase these fans individually, right? Then your whole case will be in one suite. That would be nice. Alright, with this said, I'd like to thank ASUS Singapore to have provided this unit, which is a loan unit, to share with you guys. In the meantime, if you guys are new to my channel, if you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, take care, goodbye, see ya.